What were you doing at the ripe age of 5 years old? Let me tell you about my childhood. I was selling or giving away almost all of my prized toys, stuffed animals, dolls, and dress-up clothes, and packing up to travel across the country. My home for the next 5 years was a 39-foot-long motorhome that I shared with my parents and brother. During this time, I traveled to 42 states and 3 Canadian provinces. Later on, I also traveled to 14 countries. I am 16 years old. As you can imagine, these experiences had a significant impact on my life. I want to share a story or two from my travels with you today. When I was about 8, we stayed for a few weeks in Alabama, meeting up with another family we had met on the road. Through a chain of events, we ended up being invited to Easter dinner by a local Alabama family that our friends knew. While much of that evening is fuzzy in my memory, a focal memory that I can recall is playing with their son and his WWE action figures. Already very foreign to me. Looking back from on after that evening, another memory that I remember is talking with my mom about the other family's proud gun ownership, and the honest conversation that my parents, who are decidedly not gun owners, had with them about our divergent choices as families. Considering this recollection, I believe that the respectful dialogue exemplified by our parents that night would set the stage for my future ideals, and subsequently, this TED Talk. The opportunity to experience a wide variety of people and cultures through travel has been a defining theme in my relatively short life. Here's a question for you. Do you have a group of people that you were most comfortable consistently engaging with socially? What do you have in common? Socioeconomic status, race, age, political identity, education, etc. Are those relationships based on similarities alone? I believe that these questions are fascinating and insightful to consider. The answers can tell us what we are, but perhaps more importantly than this, the answers provide a look into the things we are not. Living in a world where we increasingly define ourselves and others by our differences and in black and white, old and young, rich or poor, left or right, this is how we can begin to unpack our biases and, just maybe, reimagine and redefine our conceptions about our diverse society and world. A 2016 Harvard study noted that individuals are likely to hold exaggerated perceptions of outgroup partisans. While the focus of this study was on perceptions of ideological extremity, much of its core content seems to hold true when considered in light of the many other intertwined identities that each of us possess. Think of this in terms of our current world. Each of us receive information about, well, everything, from political news to celebrity news, from various and extremely varied news sources. Some of these sources include the internet and TV news, as well as friends and family. The content that we ingest contributes to our understanding of outgroups, or people who fall into identities that are outside the sphere of our own. The result of a study conducted by researchers from both the University of Houston in Texas and the University of Munich in Germany suggests that regular exposure to stereotypical news coverage creates negative implicit attitudes. That is, the media that we are exposed to helps to shape our attitudes about other groups. The negative potential of the human tendency to divide ourselves into in-groups and out-groups is demonstrated in a theory called affirmation bias. This theory explains that humans are inherently more likely to have positive feelings toward our in-group and negative ones toward the out-group. Put simply, we are wired to dislike people who are different from us. The combination of these and other factors leads to the result of being socially conditioned to see ourselves as at odds with others, when in reality, our differences are much less extreme than one might think. In a changing and diverse world, I believe that it is important not to fall victim to the false narrative that life is a series of black and white problems and people that exist with no more nuance than we've been socially conditioned to see in them. Traveling from such a young age was formative in the development of my worldview and has always challenged me to be a better, more informed, and more unbiased person. Each of us is relatively sheltered within our own social bubbles, and having to leave mine was probably one of the best things to ever happen to me. The elderly folks I befriended in so many RV parks, the cultures that clashed with my known world all across the country, the kindness of strangers who didn't know me at all. These are what have made me. The naivety of childhood made my biases less strong from the start of this adventure, but it wasn't this that kept me going. It was the realization that good and worthwhile people are a much more varied group than the people I know or will ever know without making the decision to try. I've decided not to be limited by the confines of my own social bubble. Bubbles are meant to be popped. Okay, another question. When you don't like someone, do you really want to spend time or be friends with them? Now, I'm going to answer that question for you. Of course not. But research shows, and we can all agree, that stepping outside of our in-groups can lead to a stronger understanding of humanity and a fuller life experience. So, how can we exit our comfort zones? How can we push past the socially imposed restrictions that we have built about who we can walk with in social circles? Who do we believe are good, worthwhile people? It's comfortable for humans to divide ourselves to know where we stand in the larger picture of our society and our world. While recognizing the limitations of our worldviews is not an easy process, it is a worthwhile one. Experiences like the one I mentioned earlier have helped to shape my own perspective on what defines a good person, and taught me how to engage respectfully with others who do not share my views. To be clear though, I am by no means perfect simply as a result of traveling, nor would I claim that having the life I have had is the only or best way of actively engaging with people who are different from ourselves. It was the mechanism that forced me to do this, though. While I know that I still have my own biases, these opportunities have taught me to challenge my own preconceptions and become willing to shift my perceptions. I recognize that not everyone will have these same experiences. So what can you do? Bring that neighbor you've never talked to before some cookies, when it's safe to do so. Maybe they have the sign of a political opponent you don't agree with in their front yard. Or maybe they just don't seem like the type of people you get along with. This kind of gesture is the perfect way to open that door of friendliness and openness. It's exactly what we need. Or you could volunteer at a community event that has to do with something you wouldn't typically be interested in. How about complimenting someone you wouldn't usually compliment when you're out, as long as you can do so in a non-creepy way? There are so many ways to expand your social circle and redefine your perceptions of others, and there's a view. If all else fails, you could always pack up and move into a motorhome. That worked for me. All it takes is a little intention and a little bravery. Will you be the person who takes the initiative and consciously makes the change? Or will you maintain the status quo out of apathy? Who are good people? You tell me.